You're not tired. You're being drained by something that feels like rest. Here's what most people don't realize about being tired. The exhaustion you feel at the end of a day scrolling through your phone, watching videos, jumping between apps. That's not rest. It feels like rest. It looks like rest. You're sitting down. You're not exerting yourself physically, but your brain is running a marathon, and it's running that marathon on a broken reward system that was never designed to handle the volume of stimulation modern life throws at it. Which means you're not just tired, you're chemically depleted, and there's a name for this pattern: the dopamine trap. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't feel like addiction in the traditional sense. You're not shaking or withdrawing or losing control of your life. You're just always a little bit drained, always needing one more scroll, one more video, one more hit of novelty to feel okay. And the cruel irony is that every time you reach for that stimulation, thinking it will energize you, it actually drains you further. You're not recharging. You're draining faster than you recover, because dopamine isn't energy. It's anticipation. And when anticipation becomes chronic, exhaustion becomes inevitable. What makes this so insidious is that it hides in plain sight. You don't see it as a problem because everyone around you is doing the same thing. Constant checking, constant refreshing, constant low-level stimulation that feels harmless but is systematically eroding your brain's ability to feel satisfaction from anything real. And the result? You wake up tired, you go to bed tired, and somewhere in between, you convinced yourself that this is just what adulthood feels like. But it's not. It's what dopamine dysregulation feels like, and there's a reason it's happening now more than ever before. Because the trap was built on purpose. You know that feeling when you wake up after 8 hours of sleep and you're still exhausted? Not physically tired. Something else. A heaviness that sits behind your eyes. A mental fog that no amount of coffee seems to clear. You're rested, technically. But you don't feel rested. You feel drained. And the worst part? You can't figure out why. Because you didn't do anything particularly demanding yesterday. You didn't run a marathon. You didn't work 16-hour shifts. You just existed. And somehow, that was enough to leave you completely depleted. Most people blame sleep quality, or stress, or age. And while those things contribute, they're not the real culprit. The real reason you're always tired has nothing to do with how much you sleep, and everything to do with how your brain is being used, or more accurately, how it's being hijacked. Because underneath that constant exhaustion is a neurological pattern that's silently draining you every single day. A pattern so subtle, so normalized, that most people don't even realize it's happening until they understand what dopamine actually does and what happens when it stops working the way it was designed to. In the next 12 minutes, you're going to understand something that will change how you see your own fatigue. Not just why you're tired, but why modern life has turned your brain's reward system into an exhaustion machine. This isn't about sleep hygiene or productivity hacks. It's about understanding the dopamine trap. And once you see it clearly, you'll never look at your daily habits the same way again. It's 6:47 p.m. The house is quiet. Your brain feels like it's been wrung out. You've spent 8 hours in meetings, answering emails, making decisions. So you collapse on the couch, pull out your phone, and start scrolling. Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. Just 5 minutes, you tell yourself. Just enough to decompress. but 5 minutes turns into 30. Then, an hour. And when you finally put the phone down, something strange happens. You don't feel rested, you feel more tired than before. Not physically exhausted, mentally hollowed out, and you barely remember what you just watched. Or maybe it's a different version of the same pattern. You sit down to work on something that matters, a project, a creative pursuit, something you've been putting off. But before you even start, your hand reaches for your phone. Just a quick check, you tell yourself, just to clear your head. But the quick check becomes a spiral. One notification leads to another. One video suggests the next. And before you know it, 40 minutes have vanished, and you haven't written a single word. You feel guilty, frustrated, but more than that, you feel drained. Like your brain just spent all its fuel on nothing. And now, there's nothing left for the thing that actually mattered. And beneath that pattern, something subtle is happening. Every scroll, every click, every tiny burst of novelty creates anticipation, not satisfaction. Anticipation, the promise that the next swipe might be more interesting than the last. Your brain stays slightly elevated, slightly alert, waiting for reward. And that state costs energy, the same energy you need to focus, to create, to feel motivated. But because the stimulation never fully resolves, your brain never fully resets. It keeps burning quietly in the background. And the result? You're running on empty, while something inside you keeps asking for more. And here's the part most people never question. This wasn't random. The exhaustion you feel may be the system working exactly as designed. From a neuroscience perspective, dopamine is not the pleasure chemical most people think it is. It's the anticipation chemical, the wanting chemical. It's what drives you to reach for the next thing, scroll to the next post, click on the next video. And here's the critical part. Dopamine spikes highest, not when you get the reward, but in the moments just before it. That brief window of expectation. That's where your brain gets flooded. And then, the moment you receive what you were anticipating, the dopamine crashes. The relief never lasts, which means you're left wanting more immediately. This is why scrolling feels endless, why one video always leads to another, why you can spend 2 hours on your phone and still feel unsatisfied. Your brain isn't chasing satisfaction, it's chasing the next hit of anticipation. And every platform you use, social media, streaming services, news feeds, has been engineered to exploit this exact neurological pattern. Variable reward schedules, infinite scroll, algorithmic recommendations designed to keep you in a state of perpetual wanting, not because they want you to be happy, but because they want you to keep you engaged. Your brain becomes like a slot machine that never fully pays out, and your exhaustion is a cost the system is willing to accept. But the damage goes deeper than just wasted time. Chronic dopamine stimulation doesn't just make you tired. It fundamentally alters your brain's reward threshold. When your dopamine system is constantly being triggered by low-effort, high-stimulation activities, it recalibrates. Real-world rewards, a finished project, a meaningful conversation, a walk outside, start to feel bland by comparison. Not because they're less valuable, but because your brain has been conditioned to expect instant, effortless dopamine hits. And when those don't come, your motivation collapses. This is called dopamine desensitization, and it's why everything feels harder than it used to. The result is a vicious cycle. You feel tired, so you reach for your phone to rest. The stimulation drains you further. Now you're even more tired, so you reach for more stimulation. And the more you try to rest this way, the worse it gets. Your brain's baseline dopamine levels drop. Your ability to feel motivated by real tasks erodes. And slowly, without realizing it, you've trapped yourself in a state of chronic mental exhaustion that no amount of sleep can fix. Because the problem isn't in your body. It's in the feedback loop your brain has been locked into, and that loop was designed to keep you exactly where you are. But here's the part that changes everything. The trap has a door. Most people just never realize they're allowed to open it. You wake up, and within seconds, sometimes before you're even fully conscious, your hand reaches for your phone. Not because something urgent happened overnight, but because the compulsion to check has become automatic. You scroll through notifications, you skim headlines, you watch a few shorts, and by the time you get out of bed, your brain has already burned through its morning dopamine reserves on content you won't remember by lunch. The day hasn't even started, and you're already depleted. Or consider this. You finally sit down to focus on something important, a work project, a personal goal, something that requires sustained attention. But within minutes, the pull starts, the urge to check your phone, to open a new tab, to see if anything new has appeared. You resist for a while, but the resistance itself is exhausting, and eventually you give in. Not because you're weak, but because your dopamine system has been conditioned to crave novelty every few minutes. So you check, and the moment you do, your focus is gone. Not for seconds, for 20, 30 minutes. And when you finally return to the task, you're not just behind, you're mentally drained from the battle you just lost. Here's a third pattern almost everyone recognizes, but few people name. You finish a meal, you sit down, and instead of just sitting, just being present, you immediately fill the space with stimulation, a video, a game, a scroll. Because the idea of doing nothing, even for 5 minutes, feels unbearable. Not because you're bored, but because your brain has forgotten how to exist without constant input. The silence feels uncomfortable. So you escape it, and every time you do, you reinforce the belief that discomfort must be eliminated instantly. That rest must be filled with noise, and that real recovery, the kind that actually restores you, has become something your nervous system no longer recognizes. What all of these moments have in common is the same underlying mechanism. Your brain has been pulled into a reward loop it was never designed to handle at this scale. Dopamine evolved to motivate you towards survival, food, safety, connection. But now it's being triggered dozens, sometimes hundreds of times per day by artificially engineered stimuli that provide no real value. And each time it fires, it costs you. Costs you focus, costs you motivation, costs you the energy you need to engage with anything that actually matters. You're not lazy, you're not weak. You're operating a nervous system that's being systematically drained. And the moment you see the pattern clearly, the loop loses some of its power. The first shift begins with a simple realization. Your brain doesn't need more discipline. It needs less stimulation. You cannot willpower your way out of dopamine dysregulation. This isn't a character flaw. It's a neurological adaptation. Your brain has been conditioned by years of engineered stimulation, and simply deciding to use your phone less won't reverse that conditioning. What works instead is a deliberate reduction of high stimulation inputs. Not as a trend, not as a punishment, but as a way to let your baseline recalibrate. That means creating structured distance from your most intense dopamine triggers. Not forever, but long enough for your nervous system to remember what normal feels like. Begin with awareness. For one day, simply notice every time you reach for high stimulation content without a clear purpose. Social media, YouTube,
news, games, don't judge it, just observe it. Most people drastically underestimate how often they stimulate their reward system. Once the pattern becomes visible, choose one behavior, the one that drains you most, and remove it completely for 7 days. Not reduce it, remove it. This temporary reduction in stimulation allows your reward threshold to stabilize. Real-world activities, reading, walking, creating, begin to feel satisfying again, but only if you give your system enough time without constantly re-triggering it. The second shift is relearning how to tolerate boredom. That word sounds trivial. It isn't. Boredom is recovery. It's where creativity resurfaces. It's where intrinsic motivation rebuilds itself. But if you've spent years filling every silent moment with stimulation, your brain has lost its tolerance for stillness. So when the urge to check your phone arises, don't fight it aggressively. Notice it. Feel it. Let it rise and fall without acting on it.
At first, it will feel uncomfortable, almost urgent, but over time, the compulsion weakens. The silence stops feeling like a void and starts feeling like space you control. And that's where energy quietly begins to return. The third shift is replacement. Not deprivation, replacement. High dopamine habits need lower stimulation counterparts. Instead of scrolling after work, go for a walk. Instead of watching videos before bed, read. Instead of checking your phone first thing in the morning, sit with your coffee and do nothing for 5 minutes. These activities may feel dull at first because your system is still calibrated for instant hits. But after a week, sometimes 2, something subtle changes. The walk feels genuinely restorative. The book becomes immersive. The morning silence feels clarifying instead of empty. And slowly, your energy returns, not in a dramatic surge, but in steady, sustainable increments. And that steady return is what weakens the trap. Here is the truth you need to hear. You're not weak for feeling tired. You're not lazy for struggling to focus. You're not broken because rest doesn't feel restful anymore. You were never meant to live in constant stimulation. Your reward system was built for a slower world. A world where dopamine fired for survival. Food found, danger avoided, connection made. Now that same system is being triggered dozens of times an hour by stimuli designed to capture your attention. And the result isn't pleasure, it's depletion. A slow, steady draining of the very energy you need to engage with life. And that exhaustion is your brain signaling that something fundamental has been thrown out of balance. The trap wasn't something you walked into through weakness. It was built around you. Optimized for engagement, refined for retention. You didn't choose this environment, but now that you see it clearly, you do get to choose what happens next. And that choice doesn't require extremes. It doesn't require disappearing from the digital world. It begins with something quieter, reclaiming your attention, reclaiming your energy, reclaiming your dopamine, not perfectly, not dramatically, but consistently, in ways your nervous system can actually sustain. The exhaustion you've been carrying isn't permanent, it's reversible, but reversal requires tolerance for discomfort. The first few days without constant stimulation may feel strange, empty, like something is missing, and in a sense, something is. the artificial anticipation your brain became dependent on. But beneath that silence is something you may have forgotten: clarity, motivation, energy that isn't borrowed from a screen, but generated from within. And when anticipation finally quiets, real rest begins. Not all at once, but steadily. And that steady reclaiming of your own nervous system is the kind of recovery that doesn't fade the moment the screen lights up again. The next time that quiet exhaustion creeps in, the kind sleep doesn't fix, pause for a moment and ask yourself this: when was the last time you let your brain be truly still? Not distracted, not entertained, not stimulated, just still. Because rest isn't the absence of effort, it's the absence of noise. The dopamine trap taught you that rest meant stimulation, that recovery meant distraction. That energy could be borrowed indefinitely from systems designed to keep you anticipating the next thing. But it can't. And the exhaustion you've been carrying isn't proof that you're weak. It's proof that your nervous system has been running without silence for far too long. So ask yourself this: what would change if you stopped reaching for the next hit of anticipation and started protecting space for real recovery? If this changed how you see your own exhaustion, tell me in the comments. I'd love to know what resonated with you. To continue this understanding, watch the next video here. And to understand human behavior at a deeper level, subscribe. We decode psychology every week.